You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja.
We love the herb.
It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, October 26, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. And boy, we got a great show for you today, just jam-packed with audio, because today Donald Trump stood in front of an audience and declared a national emergency over the opioid overdose epidemic. And folks, all I got to say is go get your checkered Vans, go get your skinny ties, go find the Frankie Says Relax t-shirt you got stored away in a box somewhere. Or for my younger listeners, go see if you can steal it from your mom and dad, because folks, the 1980s are back. Wait till you hear this audio. I mean, it's literally Jeff Sessions. He spoke before Donald Trump did. He spoke at a different event, but before Trump made the announcement, pretty much echoed what Trump was going to say. I don't want to give too much away because I've got the clips for you. Plenty of clips we're going to get to in the Radical Rant today of President Trump's remarks about declaring an opioid overdose emergency and what he plans to do to fight it. I'll give you a hint. Nancy Reagan. That's right. He's invoking Nancy Reagan. Hell, he didn't even invoke just Nancy Reagan. He invoked Richard Nixon. So we'll bring that to you coming up in the Radical Rant. Lots of audio to get to today. Also on the program today, we take a visit to one of my favorite cities. I just got to visit there for the first time ever this year, back in May. New Orleans, the Big Easy. And our guest today is Kevin Caldwell. He's with Commonsense NOLA. They're working for marijuana reform at the municipal level. And it's a really good interview for you folks to actually, it's more of a lecture, but it's a really good talk to listen to from an activist working in one of the toughest places in the South, trying to get marijuana laws reformed. And understanding the big picture sometimes starts with the smallest brushstrokes. And so he's talking about reforming at the municipal level, getting your city decriminalized before you move on to your state. So we'll talk about that coming up at 12:30. But first, we got to get to the cannabis headline news, and there is some whoppers in today's news.
This is your cannabis headline news. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net. The complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your cannabis headline news for Thursday, October 26, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. Today, President Trump declared a national emergency concerning the drug overdose epidemic in America. The president pledged to spend billions of taxpayer dollars in a public-private partnership with the pharmaceutical companies to develop non-addictive painkillers. Trump also vowed that America will be a, quote, drug-free society, end quote, and that taking drugs, quote, is not a victimless crime, end quote. Harkening back to the views of former First Lady Nancy Reagan, Trump outlined a vision of stopping drug abuse before it starts by teaching children to just say no. Trump promised, quote, really tough, really big, really great ads, end quote, to convince children and adults that using drugs is, quote, very bad, end quote. Trump's remarks were echoed by his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who spoke to the Heritage Foundation shortly before the president's announcement. The founder and majority owner of Insys Therapeutics Incorporated was arrested today and charged with leading a nationwide conspiracy to profit by using bribes and fraud to cause the illegal distribution of a fentanyl spray intended for cancer patients experiencing breakthrough pain. John N. Kapoor, age 74, of Phoenix, Arizona, a current member of the board of directors of Insys, was arrested this morning in Arizona and charged with RICO conspiracy, as well as other felonies, including conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud and conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback law. Kapoor, the former executive chairman of the board and CEO of Insys, will appear in federal court in Phoenix today. He will appear in U.S. District Court in Boston at a later date. INSIS infamously donated $500,000 to the campaign opposed to the legalization of marijuana in Arizona, the only state of 5 that voted on the issue in 2016 that did not pass. Earlier this year, INSIS was given the green light by the DEA to begin development of their own Schedule II synthetic cannabinoid medicine. The Federal Aviation Administration is reviewing an obscure 1972 regulation, reported by Marijuana Moment earlier this month, that appears to allow air transportation of state legal marijuana. The move comes after regulators in Massachusetts said they are considering using the rule as a basis for getting cannabis to and from Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. Enacted just 2 years after the founding of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, the 1972 Federal Aviation Administration rule banning pilots from operating aircraft with illegal substances on board specifies that it, quote, does not apply to any carriage of narcotic drugs, marijuana, and depressant or stimulant drugs or substances authorized by or under any federal or state statute or by any federal or state agency, end quote. An earlier 1969 version of the regulation did not contain the clause protecting state legal activity. Medical marijuana patients in Arizona are once again confused about the legality of cannabis extracts following the latest court ruling that finds they are not. Navajo County Superior Court Judge Dale Nielsen wrote, quote, the court reads that the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act language of any mixture or preparation thereof as making reference to the dried flowers of the plant and as such without further definition or information that cannabis can be extracted from a dried flower. The court cannot find that this would include cannabis, end quote. Nielsen explained that, quote, cannabis, under the Arizona criminal law, is, quote, the resin extracted from any part of a plant of the genus cannabis and is every compound manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of such plant, its seeds, or its resin, end quote. An exception is given for oil or cake made from pot seeds or stalks. The Medical Marijuana Act, on the other hand, contains no definition for cannabis. In an interview with former NBA player Al Harrington, ex-NBA Commissioner David Stern said he is in favor of removing marijuana from the league's list of banned substances, saying, quote, I think there is universal agreement that marijuana for medical purposes should be completely legal. He said his policies of banning marijuana were appropriate when he was commissioner. However, he has changed his perception along with the United States, saying, quote, I think we have to change the collective bargaining agreement and let you do what is legal in your state, end quote. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Thursday, October 26, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
And now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
Call it what you want. It's all the same. I'm here to tell you that marijuana...
Are they still trying to feed us that junk about weed?
Well, maybe you need to listen, girl. You may not be an addict on the streets, but like my cousin Derek, he sure got hung up on it.
And girls, let me tell you, smoking it can really mess up your lungs.
And you can stop caring about stuff, like school, like your friends.
Well, I can see I'm in the wrong place.
She's headed for a whole lot of trouble.
To combat this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at mjagenda.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855. Welcome to the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle, dedicated to the promotion of marijuana activism throughout the great American South, from Louisiana to Florida and as far north as Kentucky to West Virginia. Now, grab some sweet tea to go with your THC. It's time for the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Southern Cannabis Chronicle. I'm Russ Belville, and joining me today, we have Kevin Caldwell. He's the founder and president of Commonsense NOLA in New Orleans, Louisiana. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hello, Russ. Thank you very much for having me on today.
I'm so glad to have you on because I feel we really need to talk more about reforming marijuana laws in the South. It's one of the toughest places to try to get any traction, but I got to see you recently at the Drug Policy Alliance Reform Conference there in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was floored because, you know, I follow this movement pretty well, but I was stunned to find out what's going on in New Orleans. So let our listeners know what's happening with decrim there.
Well, just to give you a quick little background, I've worked at lobbying on the state level for 4 years now, and we've had some very minor successes. And about 2 years ago, I really kind of started to come to the conclusion or the realization that, all politics is local. And if you're not getting the results that you want on a statewide level, maybe take a step back and find municipalities or, your local area that you're going to find a little bit more friendly reception. And here in New Orleans, we really did. I mean, New Orleans has a long tradition with cannabis. It was our jazz musicians 100 years ago who really kind of started pushing it through the Midwest as they toured and playing jazz. And as I really started to look at the numbers, in 2011, our city council did its first municipal ordinance, which would allow a first-time offender to be written a municipal summons. Prior to that first ordinance coming into effect, New Orleans arrested on average 6,000 arrests a year for simple cannabis possession. And between 2011 and 2014, those numbers changed, and they went down to an average of 2,500 arrests a year, with about 1,500 to 1,600 municipal summonses being written every year. And actually, the New Orleans Police Department did a fantastic job of implementing that ordinance, and the racial disparities in which these summonses were being written were very equitable. 67.5% of the time when the offender was Caucasian, they wrote a summons, and 68.3% of the time when the offender was African American, they wrote a summons. And that's something that I've always really cheered the New Orleans Police Department on. Commonsense NOLA started a community outreach program to change our city's home rule charter to allow the production, sale, and taxation of cannabis. And now we knew at that point that it really would not change state law, but hopefully we could bring about a vote just to see how well this was going. We needed 12,000 signatures, and it's tough, with a small group trying to get those numbers of signatures. But the city council noticed what we were doing, and Councilwoman Susan Guidry, working through my own personal council person, started meeting with me, and we started talking about different ways that we could change municipal law. And we went through a long process, and I was really honored that she, had me as part of the policy recommendations for the ordinance. And as we moved forward, we had her legislative aide was a gentleman named Tyler Gibson, who's now with the Inspector General's Office of the New York Police Department. And he really embraced what we were doing and recognized that the enforcement of prohibition creates a wall between the community and the police. And we really just started working on how is it that we could best implement this to help the most people. We know, as you very well, and you point out on your show so well, the racial disparities in which cannabis prohibition has always been enforced. And they saw that, but they still recognized that 2,500 arrests was just too many people a year going into the criminal justice system for something that is very widely accepted in our community. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to spend any time here, but the smell of cannabis is not something rare in this city. We also were talking about the number of sick people in our community, both cancer patients, HIV, chronic pain, who were already using cannabis to mitigate some of the effects of their ailments and illnesses. And the councilwoman was really fantastic, really listened to what we were pushing. And the final ordinance that got passed 7-0 in our city council allowed for anybody over 17 years old, okay, to be written a municipal summons for simple possession of marijuana, which in Louisiana is defined as 0 to 2.5 pounds. I will say that, well, I'll get to that in a second about the implementation of the ordinance, but that it also covered flower and any other form of cannabis, oils, tinctures, any of the different ways it can be used. And that was specifically done for our medical patients. And, our medical program is deeply flawed here in Louisiana and is yet to be implemented. We hope to see it really kick off the ground and begin to get to the limited numbers of patients it covers within the next year. But when I looked at the council people and said, listen, we have people that are ill today, and they're taking care of their illnesses today. And we really need them to not be afraid of the criminal justice system, in addition to whatever trials and tribulations they're going through with their illnesses. And the council was very recognized that, and they recognized the glacial pace that reform happens on the state level in Louisiana. And it was a great combination. It was an honor to work with them. After it was passed, the ordinance went to the chief of police, who crafted the policy on how they were going to implement that policy. And that is where they came up with the 2.5 pound rule. I think.
Wait a minute. Just so our listeners are absolutely sure what you just said. Not 2.5 ounces, 2.5 pounds.
Wow. Well, I will say when I was advocating for patients and such during the policy process, I was really pushing for 1/4 to 1/2 pound for patients who had to make their own oil, and to say, listen, if you're going to make your own oil, you have to, you need to at least 1/4 to 1/2 pound to make it even worth the process to go through. But one of the idiosyncrasies of Louisiana state law is that that simple possession is defined as 0 to 2.5 pounds. In 2015, on a state level, we were able to change the laws for so that your second offense was a misdemeanor and not a felony. Before that, simple possession was defined as 0 to 60 pounds. And I like to call that as a pay-to-play sort of situation. The fact is if you were relatively well off and could afford a good attorney, or if you were connected, any sort of violation like that could kind of be swept under the table as a misdemeanor. So I believe that the chief, and most likely, with the support of the administration, were really kind of challenging the state on the fact of how they could define simple possession as up to 2.5 pounds. And it was very interesting that a lot of, specifically in our very conservative suburbs and such, they fought the ordinance very hard up until implementation. And then they were very quiet because they did not want to have that conversation as to why we define simple possession to be such a large number. And hats off to our chief of police and the mayor to challenge the state on that. But yes, you did hear me correctly. It is 2.5 pounds.
That is really amazing. Kevin, I want to make sure that if people want to follow up on this and find some more information out, that they can get in touch with you guys there at Commonsense NOLA. Do you have any Facebook pages or websites you want to tell them about?
I do have a website. We're in the process of relaunching it. But the best way is through our Facebook page, which is just Commonsense NOLA, NOLA being capitalized. We currently what we're doing is we're trying to work with other cities in Louisiana, notably Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and Shreveport, as well as through that council. I've had people reach out from Mobile, Alabama, and Jackson, Mississippi. I think that these municipal pushes, Russ, are key in the South, because whereas we see that the control that district attorneys and sheriff's associations and such have over the state legislators, we are not a homogenous society in the South. There are pockets of progressive thought, and we need these pockets to show their displeasure with the number of people going into the criminal justice system for cannabis. And so we've been really working on a municipal push, and then slowly but surely start trying to turn these states by, at a certain point, each state is going to have a tipping point. And, I think for Louisiana, if we can get our 4 largest cities to embrace similar policies. Now, I'm not expecting them to adopt a policy quite as progressive as what New Orleans did, but even to come in and make it an ounce. I mean, that's fine. That's, the way it is in a lot of places. But to push that so that we can leverage those successes onto our state legislatures and really start ending prohibition in the South from the grassroots up.
I think that is a very wise plan. We appreciate you moving forward with that. Kevin Caldwell with Commonsense NOLA. Check them out on the web. And if you'd like to get involved, I'm sure they'd love to have your support. Kevin, thanks for joining us here on the Southern Cannabis Chronicle, and good luck to you with the rest of those cities.
Thank you very much, Russ. I appreciate it.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. If you're a cannabis brand looking to build trust and awareness within the community, consider becoming a sponsor of this program. Your message will be seen and heard by the most dedicated followers of marijuana policy reform, who are loyal and supportive of those brands that give back to the community. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button to learn how your brand can also be featured in my live nationwide appearances. Thank you for your support.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am ill.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
People don't smoke marijuana.
Well, today, President Trump finally got around to declaring a national emergency over the drug overdose crisis, and having to watch that video today really strained my ability to maintain composure. Let me tell you, folks, Everything old is new again. I lived through the 1980s once before as a teenager. Apparently, I get to live through them again. Damn me for not keeping my skinny ties. Oh, my goodness. First of all, the day started off with Jefferson Beauregard Jeff Bo Sessions, the Keebler Gump, the Sling Blade Hobbit, our Attorney General, speaking before the Conservative Heritage Foundation for the Fall Legal Strategy Forum. And he was speaking with former Attorney General Edwin Meese, who was kind of moderating a panel discussion when they got around to this opioid epidemic and drugs in general. And it's a longer clip, a little over 2 minutes on this one, but I really thought you should hear the whole thing just to get the feel for what's coming back, just so you can feel the 1980s vibe like a John Hughes movie. Here it is, Jeff Sessions today at the Heritage Foundation.
Well, you've mentioned a number of things here. One of the things that you'll be talking about today with the president is this whole opioid crisis. Explain a little bit about your plans in terms of the drug problem in this country and particularly the opioid situation now.
We lost our poise a little bit here, our stability on it. People begin to say the drugs don't make a difference. But General Meese, we have never come close to 2015 having 52,000 people die as a result of a drug overdose. And last year it was 64,000. This is unbelievable. It's more than the height of the AIDS epidemic. It's more than accidents and gun accidents combined. And so we've got to reestablish first a view that you should say no. People should say no to drug use. They got to protect themselves first. But we're going after the drug dealers. The fentanyl people are really killers at fentanyl, and the police officers are even afraid to open a bag because they can die as a result of just the dust coming out of a bag. And so the president's going to announce strong policy in just a few minutes. I look forward to supporting it, but I do think that this whole country needs to not be so lackadaisical about drugs. And when you talk to police chiefs consistently, they say much of the addiction starts with marijuana, and it's not a harmless drug. But fundamentally, the big dangers, the big killers are the heroin and fentanyl and carfentanil and those kind of things. Cocaine, methamphetamine are all coming in record amounts. It's compact. You can smuggle it in because you can get a lot of dosage units out of meth, a lot of dosage units out of heroin, lots of them, 10 times as many or 100 times as many out of fentanyl. Get the same impact. So the challenge to law enforcement is really tough, and we're going to be working on that. And the president's given us the directive to work on it, and that we will do.
My goodness.
You're a neo-maxi-zoom dweeby.
Thank you, John Bender. You're absolutely right. There's three things in there. I mean, besides, just getting to listen to Jeff Sessions, goodness gracious. 64,000 people. First of all, just say no. Just say no is back, everybody. We get to do the whole just say no thing again. Just say no to drugs. Just say no. And then these addictions, police departments all across America will tell you that it starts with the marijuana. It starts with the marijuana. So if nobody ever smoked marijuana, there'd be no heroin addiction, right? There'd be no opiate addiction. If we just stopped 31 million people in America from smoking marijuana, if we just stopped the millions of people living in 8 states now where it's completely legal to do so from smoking marijuana, why then we could end the opiate overdose crisis. Because, none of these people ever start by, getting pills prescribed to them legally by doctors. Jeez. And then this whole dosage units thing that he said at the end regarding the fentanyl and the carfentanil, that's so much easier to smuggle because you can get so much more dosage units. Dude, you're describing what we call, as Richard Cowan coined, the iron law of prohibition. The iron law of prohibition states that if you prohibit a drug, the only thing you will succeed at doing is making it stronger. making it more potent. That's it. You'll increase its potency. And you'll create a whole lot of crime too, but it's a simple fact for this very simple reason. Think back to alcohol prohibition. When you were smuggling alcohol in over the Canadian border or bringing it in off a boat, you got a limited amount of space to take that drug across the border, that prohibited substance. Now, are you going to fill your trunk or your boat with beer, or are you going to fill your trunk or your boat with whiskey that you can make a whole lot more money on, the more potent variety? The economics of prohibition dictate that the drug will get more potent, as we have seen throughout the 40-year war on drugs. Drugs are more potent now than when we prohibited them. So that's going to happen with your fentanyl and your carfentanil, and will happen with any drug that has a high demand and little access, either through prohibition or through addiction or through overprescribing or whatever it might be. So that was Jeff Sessions earlier today, which was kind of like the warm-up act to the hitmaker, Donald Trump, the Trumpkin. Oh, my goodness, the Orange Cheeto Mussolini, who spoke today to declare this national emergency with respect to the opiate overdose crisis, or more generally, just the overdose crisis, because he really just was referring to all drugs here. So let's run through these, because there's a few disturbing trends within this speech that I think we need to fear. Let's start with Donald Trump talking about one of the solutions here.
The National Institute of Health, headed up by Francis Collins, has taken the first steps of an ambitious public-private partnership with pharmaceutical companies to develop non-addictive painkillers and new treatments for addiction and overdose. So important.
Wow. Pushing a whole lot of money through our departments of health in a public-private partnership with pharmaceutical companies to develop non-addictive painkillers. Now, you and I know of a particularly non-addictive painkiller that has been shown to reduce opiate overdose deaths in the states where it's legal by 25%. That has been shown to reduce the average number of opiate pills or painkiller pills prescribed to patients by 1,826 doses a year. We know what that herb is, of course. But here's the thing, folks. So do the pharmaceutical companies. They know what the herb does as well. And that story we brought you earlier, the Department of Justice just released the arrest of the CEO of Insys Therapeutics. Now, Insys Therapeutics makes that fentanyl spray. They're also the ones that donated $500,000 to defeat Arizona's legalization successfully. And right after that defeat, early spring or winter of this year, the DEA gave them the go-ahead for a Schedule II, development of a Schedule II synthetic cannabinoid painkiller. It all ties together, you see. So now we're going to throw billions of taxpayer dollars to the pharmaceutical companies to develop non-addictive painkillers. Who wants to bet those will be cannabinoid pharmaceuticals? Because that's pretty much the solution you have to come up with. Kill two birds with one stone, doesn't it? And Trump's serious about this.
I will be pushing the concept of non-addictive painkillers very, very hard. We have to come up with that solution.
We've got the solution. We've already got the solution. They just don't want that solution. Now, this next clip, another long one, but it's the beauty of doing a podcast. I can make these clips as long as I like. Another long clip. This is Trump rattling off the drug epidemic statistics. Now, we've covered some of these statistics on the show, and most of what he's saying here is fairly accurate. To me, it's just fun listening to Trump try to, read mathematics.
Last year, we lost at least 64,000 Americans to overdoses. That's 175 lost American lives per day. That's 7 lost lives per hour in our country. drug overdoses are now the leading cause of unintentional death in the United States by far. More people are dying from drug overdoses today than from gun homicides and motor vehicles combined. Think of it. Motor vehicle crashes, gun homicides, more people by far from drug overdoses. These overdoses are driven by a massive increase in addiction to prescription painkillers, heroin, and other opioids. Last year, almost 1 million Americans used heroin, and more than 11 million abused prescription opioids. The United States is by far the largest consumer of these drugs, using more opioid pills per person than any other country by far in the world. Opioid overdose deaths have quadrupled since 1999 and now account for the majority of fatal drug overdoses. Who would have thought? No part of our society, not young or old, rich or poor, urban or rural, has been spared this plague of drug addiction and this horrible, horrible situation that's taken place with opioids.
All right, so again, let's run down for Mr. Trump that in the state of California, where they've had ample access to medical cannabis for 20 years now, by November, be 20 years, right? And they have 1/3 fewer overdoses than the national average. 1/3 fewer. And we're talking about the most populous state. Now, of course, it's a rate, so it's still per capita, but still the most populous state with heavy urban areas all throughout the state. 1/3 fewer overdoses, which tells you that if California is down on the scale and we're seeing 64,000 die, we know where those overdoses are happening. They're happening in Trump country. They're happening in the counties, and there's a correlation. You can look that one up too. A correlation of Trump vote to opiate overdose. You know, it's also fascinating to me to listen to his comparison of the comparison to make it seem how terrible it is that we have more deaths from drugs than guns and car crashes, gun homicides and car crashes combined, right? Why that's funny to me, because statistically speaking, if you were in any other country and you said, oh, there's more drug deaths than gun deaths, they'd be like, what, 10? 11? Right? That's just funny to me in a dark sense that, we have so many gun deaths that it can be used as a measuring stick as to how awful something is. And speaking of that, the president, it's so hard for me to make that concept, but Trump said, brought up the fact that we consume more opiates than any other country on earth by far. Like we consume in the 90 percentiles of oxycodone and hydrocodone, and like in the 80th percentile of opiates altogether. I'm pretty sure on that one. But way more than the rest of the world. Why is that? But isn't it interesting to think how in America, you know, we like to say USA, number one, we're number one. But really, we're number one in a few categories. It's not education. It's not intelligence. It's not healthcare. It's not social well-being or happiness or income equality or a lot of things, right? Where the U.S. is number one is opiate consumption. We're number one in imprisonment. We're number one in gun deaths, developed countries. And we're the number one military by far. Isn't that interesting? Where we're number one. Could there be a correlation amongst these variables? Could it be that we're a society that's so fixated on death and guns and military and lock them up and so corrosive to one another, so afraid, so much fear amongst ourselves that many of us have to kill that fear, have to eat drugs or alcohol, which is a drug, or all sorts of things that we do to try to disconnect and not realize what's going on around us. Let's go on with the next Trump clip. This is, here we go, folks.
Our administration will be doing is a massive advertising campaign to get people, especially children, not to want to take drugs in the first place.
Oh, that's it. Oh, what a brilliant idea. If only someone had thought about this before, 30, 40 years ago, and just come up with a massive advertising campaign to convince kids that drugs are bad. Just convince the kids.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs. If you do them, you're bad because drugs are bad, okay?
That's what we need to do. That's it. Just a massive advertising campaign. That's all that needs to happen here. Of course.
They will see the devastation and the ruination it causes to people and people's lives.
Yeah, that's all that. If the kids could just see that drugs ruin people's lives, that's all it would take. We would just have to make sure that we could teach these kids that drugs are bad and doing them is just going to make bad things happen. That's all it takes. I know. What about something like this? Now, why won't these clips play? I don't know. All right, we'll just go back to Donald Trump here. For some reason, the anti-drug clips don't want to play. They're misbehaving, maybe because I didn't put them in the right drive. Oh, well, let's go back to Trump. Okay, let's not go back. We're not going to hit any of them. Oh, this is how cruel, computer. All right, well, free does not exist. Okay, let's try this one. No, we're all just going to misbehave today. Okay, well, Trump went on to have a lot more comments, and let's see if I can just pull them up in another way, because some of these are just really amazing. We'll do them.
Watch what happens if we do our jobs, how the number of drug users and the addicted will start to tumble downward over a period of years. It will be a beautiful thing to see.
So just, he's just predicting that put on the Just Say No ads and everything will be fine again. We tried this before. It's been proven not to work. Every published study, peer-reviewed, that has come out on the anti-drug ad idea that we could advertise our way out of drug addiction has shown it to be a miserable failure, and in some cases encouraged kids to get more involved with drugs.
If we can teach young people not to take drugs, just not to take them, the fact is, if we can teach young people and people generally not to start, it's really, really easy not to take them.
This is really, I'm just about to go back and get my Frankie Goes to Hollywood music out, and it's a complete return to the 1980s, the failed policies, and despite what we're getting from the people, the Gallup poll just showed a 64% support for marijuana legalization nationwide. Even the president's own party, 51% agree that we should be legalizing marijuana. It's just remarkable, isn't it?
I've been playing rock and roll for a lot of years, and I've done it all. Now I do it without drugs. Hey, don't get me wrong, I still party with the best of them, but now I do it clean. I'm on top of everything I do.
Really tough, really big, really great advertising. So we get to people before they start.
There you go. What's tougher than Motley Crue frontman Vince Neil, who was convicted of a drunk driving accident that killed his fellow passenger, the drummer from Hanoi Rocks, and as part of his court-ordered community service, had to record that anti-drug ad that nobody believed for a second. Yeah, really tough, really big, really great ads is going to end the problem of opiate addiction. That, and we also need to tell the druggies themselves how awful they are.
We must confront the culture of drug abuse head on to reduce demand for dangerous narcotics.
Confront the drug culture. Confront the drug culture. Would that be the Coors Lights ad on the Coors Light ads on the TV? Would that be Miller Park, where they play baseball in Milwaukee? Would that be the culture that we're going to be attacking, or are we talking more about the Ask Your Doctor ads or the massive side effect ads that we hear every commercial break when we're watching the television? Are we going to confront that drug culture? No, I don't think so. And talk about everything old is new again. Really, this is you get your early 80s. We get the whole spectrum of 80s here. I'm feeling right at home. I'm a child of the 80s, right? So we're getting the whole spectrum range. We got the whole Nancy Reagan just say no spectrum of the early 80s, 81, right? And now we get to go all the way to 89, early 90s, Papa Bush era, when we're talking Donald Trump's next quote.
Every American should know that if they purchase illegal drugs, they are helping to finance some of the most violent, cruel, and ruthless organizations anywhere in the world.
God, that sounded so familiar to me.
Illegal drug use is not a victimless crime.
Where have I heard that before?
Grandma, I thought you said you were going to quit smoking.
Someday, sweetheart. Someday. I promise.
Well, okay, so that's not the clip I was expecting to play there.
Are you all right?
All right. We're having all sorts of funs with the audio cards tonight. Yeah, Papa Bush, 1990s. Remember that? The drugs, or was it? No, it was W. Bush, maybe. It was W. Bush with the drugs fuel terrorism ads right after 9/11. Yeah, when I helped the terrorists win. I helped kill a family in Colombia. Yeah, it's the same old rhetoric, right? Nothing new coming out of Donald Trump.
There is nothing admirable, positive, or socially desirable about it. There is nothing desirable about drugs. They're bad.
They're bad. Drugs, just terrible. Not the stuff that you're being prescribed, not the alcohol or tobacco, but drugs. Drugs are bad.
We want the next generation of young Americans to know the blessings of a drug-free life. And we will help to build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society. We are going to overcome addiction in America.
We've turned the corner on drug addiction in the United States. Drug addiction in the United States is under control.
Oh, goodness. Somehow I got a Nixon quote in there. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, I guess from 70s all the way through George W. Bush. Really? We're getting some Nixonian drug-free society. We're turning the corner on addiction. We're getting a little of that 80s Nancy Reagan just say no. We're getting a little of that Papa Bush. We'll have enough room in the prisons for them all. We're getting a little of that W. Bush. You're helping fund the terrorists. Everything old is new again. All right, folks. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me and enjoying the live hijinks. Too much audio. For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.